Downtown Dallas, March 1984. The kind of neighborhood where 47 robberies had occurred in the past 6 months, and the police were giving up on prevention and moving into pure damage control. Samuel Reed had been trying to get to the bank since 6:47 a.m. He was 64 years old. He was missing his left leg from the knee down, a mine in Da Nang in 1969. The kind of clean amputation that meant he'd lived, but his running days were finished. He wore a prosthetic that worked fine on level ground and worked terribly on the uneven concrete sidewalks of downtown Dallas. The bank was 3 blocks away. He'd made this walk exactly 4 times a week for the past 12 years. Always at the same time, always carrying the deposit bag from his job. Small accounting work he did from home, paid in cash by clients who didn't ask questions and didn't leave paper trails. This morning was different. This morning he was carrying $4,200 in that bag. Not cash for the bank deposit, cash that was going to buy his daughter a car. She was graduating in May. She'd been accepted to SMU. She was going to start over, and Samuel Reed was going to be the man who made that possible. He didn't know that 2 men had been watching him leave his apartment building. The first man was Jerome Black, 32 years old, 6'2", 225 pounds. He had a record that went back 14 years, 6 robbery convictions, 4 assault convictions, 2 years in state prison for a shooting that had gone wrong. He'd gotten out 8 months ago. He hadn't been able to find legitimate work because of the record. He'd started stealing because it was what he knew. He'd gotten good at reading people. He could spot the ones who'd give up their money without fighting back. The ones who were too old, too weak, too dependent on something, a cane, a walker, a prosthetic, to resist. Jerome had robbed 31 people in the past 6 months. He'd been arrested 0 times. The second man was Tyrone Bell, 26, 5'11", 195 pounds. He'd been in Jerome's orbit for 3 months. He'd never been arrested before, which meant he was either lucky, or he was careful, or he was someone Jerome had trained. Jerome had trained him. Tyrone didn't have the same confidence yet. He still got shaky hands sometimes. But Jerome said that would pass. Jerome said that if Tyrone could learn to stop thinking about the person and start thinking about the money, the shakes would go away. Tyrone was carrying a folding knife with a 4-inch blade. They'd been standing on the corner watching Samuel's building for exactly 43 minutes. They knew his routine. Jerome had watched him twice already on previous walks. He was slow. He was predictable. He didn't look around. He trusted the world to leave him alone because he was old and broken, and who would hurt someone like that? Jerome would hurt someone like that. That was Jerome's entire philosophy. That was how he'd survived for 32 years. The bank was 3 blocks away. Samuel was making maybe 1 block per 3 minutes because of his gait, because of how his prosthetic redistributed his weight, because his body had learned to move in a way that didn't damage him further. That meant he had 8 minutes before he'd reach the bank's doors and enter a space with cameras and witnesses and police response time. Jerome and Tyrone had exactly 8 minutes. Chuck Norris was in downtown Dallas because of a karate tournament the night before. He'd competed in one and stayed at a hotel 2 blocks from where Samuel Reed was now walking. He was on his way to get breakfast at a diner that had served him the same eggs and hash browns for the past 5 years. The diner was 1 block to the left off the street Samuel was walking on. Chuck walked out of his hotel at 7:03 a.m. He was moving at normal speed. He wasn't looking for anything. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was just hungry, and he wanted coffee, and he wanted to be back at the airport by 2 p.m. What he noticed was the way Jerome and Tyrone moved. Not because they were moving fast, they weren't, but because of how they positioned themselves. They were standing on a corner that had no reason to hold 2 men at 7:04 in the morning. They weren't waiting for a bus. There was no bus stop. They weren't waiting for anything. They were waiting for someone. And the way Tyrone's hand kept going to his pocket and then stopping suggested they were waiting for someone who had something worth taking. Chuck crossed the street and kept moving toward the diner. He was thinking about eggs. He wasn't thinking about Jerome and Tyrone. He wasn't thinking about Samuel Reed. He was just crossing downtown Dallas at 7:04 a.m. like he'd crossed 1,000 other streets in 1,000 other cities. What he didn't know was that his path and Samuel's path were going to intersect at the same corner where Jerome and Tyrone were standing. Samuel reached the corner at 7:08. He was making decent time. His prosthetic was cooperating. The morning wasn't too hot yet. He was thinking about his daughter's face when she opened the car keys on graduation day. He was thinking about how her mother had died, not knowing if Samuel could provide for both of them. He was thinking about how this moment, this one deposit, this one moment of his daughter getting something she deserved, was going to redeem some part of all those years. He didn't see Jerome until Jerome was 4 feet away. Jerome moved like someone had switched on a light. He went from standing still to moving with absolute purpose in the space between one heartbeat and the next. Tyrone was beside him. They were both closing the distance to Samuel at the same time. Samuel's hand went to the bag instinctively. His body tried to move backward, but his prosthetic didn't respond fast enough. His weight shifted wrong. He was off balance. Jerome hit him in the chest with a closed fist. Samuel went down hard. The concrete was unforgiving. His head snapped backward but didn't hit the pavement. His arms came up to catch him instead. The bag flew out of his hand. Tyrone grabbed it. Jerome was already reaching down to get the money out of Samuel's pockets. And Samuel was trying to get back up, but his prosthetic was compromised now. The weight distribution was wrong, and his body wasn't designed to recover from being tackled by a man who outweighed him by 60 pounds. Tyrone had the bag. Jerome was backing away. They'd been on the ground for maybe 4 seconds. Nobody was coming. This was it. This was working perfectly. Chuck heard it. He was exactly 1 block away, 15 yards from the corner where it was happening. He didn't hear the punch impact. That wasn't loud enough to travel a block through downtown morning traffic. But he heard the bag hit the concrete. He heard Jerome grunt. He heard the particular sound of someone hitting the ground hard and not getting up immediately. That sound meant something was wrong. Chuck turned around. He was maybe 30 yards away now. Jerome and Tyrone were already moving. They knew the critical moment was to leave, to disappear into the side streets before anyone could actually respond. Jerome had the bag. No, Tyrone had the bag. Jerome was already at a light jog, moving east, his body language shifting from assault to retreat. Samuel was still on the ground. Chuck started moving towards Samuel. He wasn't running. He was walking fast, but he wasn't running. Running would telegraph too much aggression. But he was covering the 30 yards in about 8 seconds. And by the time Jerome and Tyrone had processed that someone was coming, Chuck was already there. Jerome saw him and made a decision. He decided Chuck looked like someone he could hurt. He decided that Chuck was alone, and Chuck wasn't following him. Chuck was checking on the old man, which meant Jerome had time. He decided that if he could take out Chuck, take whatever Chuck was carrying, he'd have cleared 2 deposits in 1 morning. What would happen in the next 6 seconds would be told in every martial arts dojo in Dallas for the next 35 years. That was Jerome's last decision. Jerome turned and moved back toward Chuck. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't need one. He was 6'2", 225 pounds, and he'd hurt people before. He'd hurt a lot of people. He was confident in a way that comes from knowing you're bigger than most people, and knowing you're willing to do things most people aren't willing to do. Tyrone watched from 7 yards away, the bag still in his hand, his knife still in his pocket. What happened between Jerome and Chuck took 6 seconds. Jerome threw a straight right hand aimed at Chuck's chin. It was a good punch from a man who'd thrown a lot of good punches. Chuck stepped back and slightly to his left. Not a dramatic movement, just a repositioning. The punch missed by 4 inches. Jerome was already committed to it, already rotating his hip into the next shot, already assuming his momentum would carry him into his opponent. His momentum did carry him into his opponent, but his opponent wasn't in front of him anymore. Chuck pivoted and redirected Jerome's own forward motion. Not by hitting him. By using Jerome's fist and wrist as a reference point, Chuck changed the angle of Jerome's attack by about 17 degrees. That small change in angle meant Jerome's center of gravity went from being over his feet to being in front of them. Gravity took over. Jerome went forward and down. He hit the concrete hard enough that his breath went out. Tyrone ran. The bag fell. Samuel was trying to sit up. His prosthetic was at an angle that his hip wasn't designed to accommodate. Pain was starting to register, but it was the secondary kind. Not the sharp stabbing pain of acute injury, but the deep aching pain of impact trauma. He looked at Chuck, and he didn't recognize him as anything except someone who just appeared in his life and changed its trajectory.
"I'm okay," Samuel said. His voice was shaking.
"I'm okay. Don't hurt him anymore. Please don't hurt him." Chuck helped Samuel up.
Jerome was breathing hard on the concrete. He wasn't getting up. He wasn't trying to get up. He was just lying there processing what had happened, which was that he'd thrown his best punch at someone, and that someone had made his punch miss without even appearing to move. That someone had used Jerome's own force against him, and Jerome had hit the ground like he'd been hit by a car. Nobody had hit him. Nobody had thrown a counterpunch. Nobody had done anything except change where Jerome was in relation to gravity. That realization was settling in very slowly. The Dallas Police Department arrived 4 minutes later. What they found was Samuel Reed sitting on the concrete with his prosthetic leg at an angle and his shirt torn and his face scraped from where he'd caught himself. What they found was Jerome Black on his back, staring at the sky, trying to figure out what had happened. What they found was Chuck Norris holding Samuel's deposit bag and explaining very calmly that 2 men had robbed an elderly man and he'd stopped the robbery. Officer Martinez took the statement from Samuel. Officer Gomez took the statement from Chuck. Officer Davis took the evidence, the deposit bag, Jerome Black, and a description of the second suspect that would lead to Tyrone Bell's arrest 8 hours later. "How did you do that?" Officer Martinez asked Chuck. "He's got 40 pounds on you easy." "I didn't do anything to him," Chuck said. "I just got out of his way." That wasn't technically true, but it was true in the way that mattered. Chuck had made a very small repositioning that had created a very large outcome. He'd done exactly as little as possible and let physics handle the rest. "He came at you and you just moved?" Martinez asked. "That's why he went down," Chuck said. "His own weight took him there. I was just the reference point he was moving around." Samuel wanted to talk to Chuck before they took him to get checked for injuries. "Thank you," Samuel said. "I know what you did. I don't know how you did it, but I know it mattered." "Your leg okay?" Chuck asked. "It will be," Samuel said. "Better than Jerome's moment right now."
"What's in the bag?" Chuck asked. Samuel hesitated for exactly 1 second. Then he told him. He told Chuck about his daughter. He told Chuck about SMU. He told Chuck about the 12 years of walking this route 3 blocks to the bank. The 12 years of trusting that the world would leave him alone because he was old and he was broken.
Chuck nodded. "She's lucky," Chuck said.
"Not because of the money, because you're still standing."
The story got out because Officer Martinez told it to another officer, who told it to a friend who did karate, who told it in his dojo.
By the end of the week, half the martial arts community in Dallas knew that Chuck Norris had stopped a robbery without actually hitting anyone. By the end of the month, the story had been refined and shaped into something that was true in its essential shape, but embellished in its specifics. Now Chuck had been waiting in the diner and heard the commotion. Now he'd known something was wrong before it happened. Now he'd been positioned on that corner for reasons nobody could quite figure out. What stayed consistent was this. Jerome Black had thrown everything he had at Chuck Norris, and Chuck had simply moved in such a way that gravity did the work. Jerome had gone down hard. Jerome had spent the next 3 weeks in a hospital bed wondering what it was possible to do to someone using nothing but your understanding of how their own momentum could destroy them. The disabled veteran had gotten his daughter the car. Samuel Reed had lived exactly the way he'd lived before. Quiet, consistent, trusting in the basic goodness of the world. But something had changed in him, too. He'd seen someone who understood violence so completely that violence became almost unnecessary. He'd seen Chuck's calmness, and calmness was contagious. 5 years later, Officer Martinez ran into Chuck at a police benefit in Dallas. "Jerome Black is out," Martinez said. "He did a state stretch for prior violations. He's out on parole." "How is he?" Chuck asked. "Different," Martinez said. "He's working. He's not hurting people anymore. Something about his time inside changed him. He keeps saying he doesn't want to end up on concrete again. Doesn't want to end up under someone who understands gravity better than he does."
Chuck nodded. "People can change," Chuck said. "Only if they have a reason to," Martinez said. "Only if they understand what happens if they don't." The story was still being told in Dallas dojos 15 years later. Not as a tale of Chuck's power, but as a lesson about what power actually was.
Jerome Black had been stronger. Jerome Black had been more experienced. Jerome Black had been more aggressive. But Jerome Black hadn't understood the principle that would betray him, that everyone is subject to gravity, and anyone who understands that can use it. Samuel Reed never got robbed again. His daughter graduated from SMU. She became a lawyer. She represented a Ford legal counsel. She did this work in Dallas, in the neighborhood where her father had lived and struggled and trusted enough to walk 3 blocks to a bank every week to deposit his earnings. In his office, Samuel kept a newspaper clipping about the robbery, not because of what Chuck had done, but because of what the robbery had forced him to understand, that there were people in the world who moved through violence the way other people move through water, not because they were violent, but because they understood the properties of how force moved through space. Chuck never spoke about it publicly. When asked, years later, what had happened in that downtown Dallas street in March 1984, he said something simple. A man needed help. I was there to provide it. That's all any of us can do. Be there when it matters and do what's necessary. The interviewer pressed him on technique, on the specific moment of Jerome Black's fall. Sometimes the best way to stop someone is to not resist them, Chuck said. Sometimes the best way to help someone is to not intervene, just to redirect. The world has a shape to it. You work with that shape instead of against it. As the story moved through martial arts circles, it became a teaching moment about something deeper than technique. It became about understanding that violence doesn't have to create new violence. It doesn't have to compound. It doesn't have to escalate. A man could assault you, and you could respond in a way that used his own force against him and removed him from the situation without turning him into someone permanently injured. Samuel Reed walked to the bank every week for the next 12 years. He never got robbed again, but he also moved through downtown Dallas differently, with gratitude for the people who understood that stopping violence meant understanding it so completely that you never had to participate in it. The disabled veteran who trusted the world to leave him alone had learned something more subtle. The world didn't leave him alone, but the people who understood how to move through violence without creating more of it, those people would show up. Not because they were looking for fights, but because they were moving through the world with their eyes open. That was the story they told. That was how it came down.